The so-called global elites have spoken. Farming is a detriment to the environment, and its biggest polluters need to be shut down and not allowed to farm elsewhere. That's what was handed down to the Dutch last week by the European Commission. We'll look into this world gone mad scenario and suggest ways you can prevent this from happening in your community. Because folks, it's probably already there. If you're concerned about American independence and freedom, then please watch and take the recommended actions. Also, be sure to share, like, and subscribe so we can reach many others. As many of you regular viewers know, the John Birch Society was established to expose, stop, and reverse the conspiratorial agenda of those trying to reset free people and free markets into a government-managed worldwide society. They call it a New World Order. We call it a conspiracy against the free world. Those undertaking this conspiratorial agenda have worked in the background for many decades. It has only been with and after the COVID pandemic that they are moving very rapidly on this agenda, not so much in secret anymore, but out in the open. In the art of organizing, the way to beat an opponent with an agenda is to be organized with a counter-agenda. Since 1958, the John Birch Society has organized to stop this agenda. Our agenda has 6 major programs that has the ability to stop globalists cold. JBS members have proven this time and again that the way to be successful isn't by starting at the national level, but by working locally within your community. One of the agenda items is to stop the New World Order, which involves getting out of the United Nations and stopping the implementation of its Agenda 2030. Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 are both initiatives from the United Nations that have been undertaken by many governments and corporations throughout the world. Agenda 21 has been in full operation since at least 2000, and Agenda 2030 was implemented in 2015. Both agenda initiatives have a goal of sustainable development. Agenda 2030 has 17 sustainable development goals, with one of them being climate action to combat so-called man-made climate change. Swallowing this hook, line, and sinker is the European Union. The EU is clearly the leader in implementing these 17 goals. It has designated areas in the Netherlands as zones that are sensitive to nature. Certain zones are required to reduce its generation of nitrates to help stop pollution and certain emissions. Farmers located in some of these zones are required to reduce nitrates by up to 95%. To do so, farmers will basically need to get rid of their animal herds, use less fertilizers, or even stop farming altogether. Some farmers have committed suicide because they see no way around this. Last week, according to the Telegraph, the Netherlands has been given the go-ahead to start buying out thousands of farmers' businesses in a bid to meet the European Union mandate on climate goals. Around 3,000 farms are targeted in this first round of voluntary cuts. We've reported on this before, but this time there is a catch. The Telegraph briefly mentions it. Farmers operating near nature conservation areas will be offered 120% of the value of their company if they agree to close their operations and promise not to restart elsewhere in the country or within the EU. The poor reasoning behind this is that if the bought-out farmers were allowed to relocate elsewhere, they would have a select advantage over other area farmers. Keep in mind, the majority of these farms have been in the family for at least 10 generations. And unfortunately, the EU means business. The Telegraph also reported that the courts have blocked an increasing number of construction projects designed to ease the country's housing crisis until nitrogen levels have been reduced. A previous court ruling paved the way for permits to be required for all activities that generated nitrogen emissions, creating the control needed to hold the country hostage until these emissions were brought down. Unfortunately, this is not the first time the Dutch government has bought out farmers. According to AgDaily.com, one of the earliest examples dates back to the 1990s, when the government offered buyouts to pig farmers in an effort to reduce the size of the pig industry and address issues related to pollution and animal welfare. Similar buyouts have been offered to other livestock farmers in subsequent years. Central planning is a key tenet under socialism and communism and has no place in a free market or free society. The Telegraph concluded, the EU's approval of the scheme, which runs until February 2028, will last as long as Dutch farmers agree to a definitive closure of their operations. Remember that the Dutch farmers had protested these policies and then formed a political party to fight back. A recent election gave them a huge victory in their Senate. This month, the government will finalize the election and the Prime Minister will form his cabinet. Within this, the farmer citizen movement should be able to stop this radical agenda. However, there are rumors that the party is merely astroturf and not really interested in standing up against the European Union. Their actions will certainly prove one way or another. And currently, the party has not put out a statement on the EU ruling. In North America, Canada has taken the first steps toward following the Dutch example of at least capping emissions, although nothing concrete has happened. In the United States, President Biden wants to cut general greenhouse emissions by 2030, but so far, nothing has been done to cap nitrogen emissions or to ban synthetic fertilizers. Yet, the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022 has designated tens of billions of dollars for carbon capture projects, including pipelines and storage facilities. Prior to this, many farmers and property owners in Iowa have had to fight against a 1,300-mile-long carbon capture pipeline that threatens to rip up some of the most productive farmland in America's heartland. This pipeline will capture carbon at more than 30 ethanol plants and then pipe it to North Dakota to be sequestered in bedrock, although some reports are indicating that the liquefied carbon will be used for fracking. Last year, affected Iowa property owners started receiving notices in the mail about signing easements or risk their property being taken through eminent domain proceedings. According to the Fifth Amendment, private property cannot be taken for public use without just compensation. Eminent domain should be the last resort for critical public projects. But a pipeline for transporting liquefied carbon dioxide to help battle the myth of man-made climate change is definitely not in the best public interest, nor in the best scientific interest. These carbon capture pipelines are also rearing their ugly heads in Illinois and Kentucky. The John Birch Society field staff coordinators, members, and supporters have been working together to organize opposition and are winning local battles so that the UN Agenda 2030 war on farmers doesn't take over American farms. When there isn't enough political stamina on the federal or state level to stand up to radical climate change extremists, then local communities must take a stand. They have the power to stop this through local village, town, and county boards. They can be pressured to protect property rights and be informed on the overall agenda that emanates from the United Nations. At least 2 counties in Iowa have placed moratoriums on these pipelines, and many more are considering it. About a decade ago, we led the fight to kick the United Nations Agenda 21 out of local communities. Now we need to kick out its Agenda 2030 to stop this war on farmers before we end up like the Dutch farmers or worse. Remember that control of farmers is control of food, and control of food is control of the population. History proves to us that food has been used as a weapon by tyrannical governments, resulting in the starvation and deaths of millions. With the federal incentives, it's just a matter of time until the Agenda 2030 pipelines start arriving in your farming community. Monitor your local government meetings to find out if this is arriving in your area, and then work with other American patriots in the John Birch Society to protect property rights and common sense. That's something that is in short supply today, but it's not due to stupidity or ignorance. It's because of an organized effort to degrade this country into being just another regional vassal under a worldwide government called the New World Order. And how we stop this is by working together using the many layers of strength that the Founding Fathers gave us. Let's work together to defeat Agenda 2030 and restore the American principles of freedom, liberty, and independence. Visit our helpful tools and educational materials at our online Stop the War on Farmers action page. All links are in the video description. I'm Bill Hahn for the John Birch Society. Until next time, learn more, take action, and get involved, Patriots.